You are now watching the Paperverse. You will play Paperverse games. Pepper is eternal. Get ready. It's almost time.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's episode. This one is going to be a little different than normal, so you're going to have to bear with me on it. This first part is going to get a little introspective, so apologies in advance. When I was still in high school, I really wanted to work in the video game industry. I was torn between two pathways, either becoming a game developer or an actual journalist. Now at the time, I was just barely sketching out the vague concepts for what would eventually become Tales from Altaria. And while excited about that, I could still feel this pull towards actual journalism. I wanted to be the next Jason Schreier, if you could believe that, just with more fur. Simply put, I was obsessed. So from then on in all my classes, I would try to incorporate that journalistic edge, whether it was applicable or not. If the teacher assigned us an annotated bibliography, then I was doing mine with articles from Kotaku and The Verge. If they gave us an essay that asked about the most difficult time in our life, I was writing about the secret courses from Mario Sunshine. In fact, I was so determined to become this amazing journalist that I went at great lengths to interview a local game developer. I had found him by sorting new on Kickstarter, then by cross-checking for local listings. At the time, his was the only one that came up. So I sent an email and waited. A part of me was just ecstatic about the opportunity to be a real journalist. My chance to deliver some quality, hard-hitting, Pulitzer Prize-worthy work. Though in spite of my aspirations, I still had a little sense. A part of me figured the dev would never respond, since the request was pretty crazy to say the least. But lo and behold, I got an email back. So fast forward about a week, and I'm sitting in an El Pollo Loco with my friends, the developer, and my little blue HP Stream 11. It was a fun interview and one of the greatest moments in my young career. Here, listen to a little snippet.
Alright, hey guys, it's me.
Name and address withheld.
And today I'm joined with a very special guest. The guy's name is Salvarian and he's a game developer. So I'll let him tell us a bit about himself.
I'm Saeed, live here.
Address withheld.
Been doing game design for pretty much my whole life. It's been an ongoing process, creating the person I am today. Made The Adventures of Molly Man, released it on Apple and Android in the past few months, and I can't wait for more adventures to come.
Alright, thanks, Saeed. Okay, so I'm going straight down this list of the questionnaire. Like I said before, we'll be out of here in 15 minutes. Sound good to you?
Sounds good.
Alright, so first question. How long did the dev process for your game take?
I've been working on it for pretty much my whole life, just bringing everything together, the ideas, and
I guess some things never change, huh? Anyways, you're probably wondering why I'm bringing this all up. And the reason is because that today's games reflect that sort of drive I had, and really the drive that most developers have for their projects. Every video I pose the question, why you should play whatever game. And I've sometimes brought up points about game development to accent my arguments about a game's merit, but I don't think I've honestly spent enough time driving those development points home. Developers and consumers exist in the industry on two separate planes. There's a vested interest from developers to want to know and understand how players interact with their products, and naturally so. But I ask, where's the consumer interest in the developer side? I mean, think about yourself for a second. In the last game you bought, did you want to ask what engine the game was made in, what the team size was, or what their workflow was? Probably not, and that's okay. They don't factor into our purchasing decisions typically because they're not really unique selling points. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't sometimes vest interest ourselves. Those efforts should be recognized. Now, I can already see the counter argument coming. But Jeeve, people do pay attention to good games. I mean, look at all the indies topping the Steam charts. We have the Game Awards, people love developers, etc, etc, etc. And look, that's all well and good, but today I'm saying it's not enough. You want my rebuttal? Look up a list of announced industry layoffs for this year. About 6 months in, and it's only getting worse. So you tell me if that signifies that developers' efforts are truly being recognized. The industry is rapidly changing, and in many ways, not for the better. But that's the larger industry as a whole. What about something more homegrown? For the rest of this video to make some sense, we need to go back in time a bit. So, right off the bat, if you're in tune with the game development scene, then the name RPG Maker definitely holds some weight. It's a very common and storied set of programs that allows anyone with minimal knowledge and skill to make some basic but pretty good RPGs. The first release of the program we all know and love was in December 17th, 1992. Although that version, RPG Sukuru Dante 98, was a Japan exclusive. RPG Maker 95 for Windows was when things really started coming together. It features many of the same staples that would later go on to define the series. Then from then on you got 2000, 03, XP, VX, VX Ace, and so on and so forth. Quite the lasting legacy. I mean, there's a reason this program has been around for so long. There were so many great indie games made using the tools. Games like Lisa the Painful, One Shot, and of course, To the Moon. Now, personally, I had the most experience using VX Ace, and truth be told, I was terrible with it. It took me like a month to figure out the basic functions. Half the time I struggled with tiling and world design, I couldn't script, and my custom characters were questionable to say the least. Though, that never stopped me from having fun. I remember being in 8th grade computer literacy class, and once again, had an assignment that was like a presentation about core computer concepts. Very easy Microsoft PowerPoint stuff. Well, my group and I decided to make a short adventure game about the subject instead. It was really bad, and I don't think it worked well, but the teacher was so impressed, or perhaps so confused, that we got an A anyways. And I feel like that was a lot of people's first interactions with RPG Maker. Just having dumb fun. The program got me and a lot of others interested in game development, and for that I'm very thankful. I couldn't have asked for a better launching pad. But that's not always a typical cadence for developers. You see, for me and many others, the games we want to make will be hamstrung by our engine of choice, a sort of right tool for the job mindset. And I think RPG Maker is far too limiting to build the game that I want to build. But that sentiment isn't shared by a subset of others. No. A lot of times with programs like these, you get savants, these extremely talented and dedicated people who can craft masterful experiences in their engine of choice. And later on in the video, we're going to look at a few projects from people just like that. Now, those RPG Maker programs like 2003, VX Ace, and MV are developed by the Katakawa Corporation, a very large conglomerate group from Japan. And large is honestly a bit of a misnomer. They've got their corporate fingers in a ton of stuff. Movies, games, publications, educational services, and web infrastructure. It's honestly insane. Large corporate consolidation is another thing that irks me about the industry, but that's a rant for another video. What's not irksome is the spirit of ingenuity and creativity on display by today's software, RPG Paper Maker. Some time ago during the first Direct's development, the small band of devs and I were thinking about how possible it would be to include non-game editions. Very brief touch-and-go talks. We had found this old Twitter link for this project, we said a few words about it, and then left it at that. It occasionally made the rounds in speculative, oh man, wouldn't this be cool kind of talks, but no one really did anything with or about it. I joined their server and kept some tabs on things, as is my MO, and I liked everything I saw on paper, but I wasn't exactly sold myself. It wasn't until I started working on this episode that I actually played around with the program and learned some things. Despite being an indie engine, there's some pretty solid features on display. Stuff like tile-based mapping, their custom event system, the real-time 3D preview, and of course, custom plugins and scripts. The elevator pitch of the program is, anyone can make a 3D video game without any knowledge in programming or 3D modeling. All very bold claims for such a small program maintained by one developer. Oh, and a few community contributors. But it does seem to hold true, and I tend to be very critical of tools used for game development, as they often become things you rely on so well into a game's lifecycle. That can become a liability if the maintainers lose their minds or something, or the last thing you want is to use a small engine for your project and then wham! The editor stops being supported a few years later as something breaks, which is a very common tale. There's a lot that can go wrong, but conversely, there's so much potential in a project like this. I was genuinely intrigued. I just had to know more. So I went directly to the source and asked a few questions about the engine and the developer's plans for it. If only young Jeeve could see himself now. But without further ado, meet Wano, French developer and sole lead on the engine. Hopefully next time I can sit down and do a full interview, but time didn't permit for this project. So I only gave a few questions for the lead developer to record their answers for. She's very busy and I wanted to make sure her time was well respected. But that's enough talking for me. Let's take a listen to someone who not only makes games, but one who creates the tools they run on. Let's give it up for Wano.
Well, I was working on my own game in RPG Maker XP, but I was limited because I wanted to switch to this 2.5D style, and I decided to create my own engine to not have any limitations anymore. And when I noticed that some people were interested on this kind of functionalities, I started to make it more friendly to use, and I liked it a lot. Doing this, so I kept doing this and paused my game to focus on the engine development. First, of course, the 3D aspect that was never introduced yet in RPG Maker series, also because it's free for non-commercial use, and because RPG Paper Maker tends to evolve faster than RPG Maker, because I try to listen to the user's needs as much as possible. And my goal as a creator is not to make lots of profits. I want to live off it, of course, but it's a passion project after all. And yes, RPG Paper Maker is designed to be used to by newbies, like RPG Maker does. Yes, there are more and more games done with it. What I like is that a lot are not necessarily JRPGs with classical turn-based battles. People try to use all the available functionalities of the engine to do special stuff. I like that every time a game is released, I kind of participated in the creation of it. I hope to see more and more games, of course, and my dream would be to have a community as large as RPG Maker does. It's particular because I'm the only developer on this project. There are some contributors helping sometimes, but I still produced almost 100% of the code. And I'm into another full-time job, so I'm working on the project when I have some free time. Currently, the priority is the 3.0 web version that is coming up soon. I try to make phases of new features updates and then several patches cycles, thanks to all the users' feedbacks.
So after hearing directly from Wano about her motivations and the unique aspects of RPG Paper Maker, it's clear that this tool to her isn't just about enabling game development. It's more about inspiring creators to bring their unique visions to life without the barriers typically encountered in game creation. And I'll give credit where credit's due. Wano's dedication to evolving the tool based on user feedback is pretty noble. Now you might be thinking, well, that's nothing special. Isn't that industry standard? Well, I tell you, no, good sir, it's not industry standard. In fact, it's kind of rare to see in the world of end-user software. It's especially prevalent in the Linux software and FOSS communities. There is this air of superiority among some developers that they know better than the end user because they're the ones with the technical prowess. If you know so much more, go build your own app. That line of thinking is just rampant in all software development, not just games. Which leads us into real-world applications of RPG Paper Maker. How is it being used by developers today? On the Genshin website, there's a section dedicated to the games developed in it. The games I'll be looking at today all were found on that section. There's quite a few tech demos, but there are some feature-complete projects as well, which is a major accomplishment if I do say so myself. It's important to keep context in mind when looking at these games. Yeah, most are smaller affairs, but this engine and its community are still in their formative years. It'll take time for the library of titles to build, but there's more than enough here to sample. Scrolling through the game list, I found a few things that were very interesting or caught my eye. So I thought it'd be fun to take a nickel tour of a few of these games, just so you get a feel for the engine and its capabilities. And I feel there's no better start than with the projects by Kevin of 9. Remember earlier when I was talking about savants being able to get the most out of a limited piece of software? Well, he's one that I consider in that number. He's responsible for several of the released projects on the Papermaker website, but there's two that caught my eye. A crafting and action RPG called Floatsome, and Final Fantasy Legend 3 Remake. Oh, that sounds pretty interesting. Okay, alright. Let's look at this one first. For those unfamiliar with the Final Fantasy Legend series, it was a new set of portable RPGs developed by Square for the Game Boy from the late 80s all the way up to around the mid 90s for Legends 3. Now, you'd be mistaken for thinking that FF Legends 3 is the same as Final Fantasy 3, but they're quite different. Legends 3 features a more open world structure where you can explore interconnected worlds and ascend a mysterious tower. Character progression is unique, allowing characters to transform into different creatures, humans, mutants, and monsters, based on their actions. Combat mechanics are less conventional, I'd say, with a focus on customization, and of course, all your strategic choices are still there. So the question is, how faithful of a recreation can an RPG Papermaker game be? It's pretty darn close. The biggest difference you'll immediately notice is color. This was a huge undertaking to do. It's pretty much the official sprites, but recolored with edits and even some material changes. So in the visual department, the game looks stellar. My only complaint is that there are several instances where things don't scale well on higher resolution displays. Now, I played all these games on my laptop, which has a panel resolution of 2880 by 1800p. It's a newer 16:10 aspect ratio, and this game does not like it at all. You'll get mismatched and cut off text, and it's pretty much game breaking, since there's no way to navigate the UI when it's cut off. Though, this is a non-problem on 16:9 displays, stuff that's 1280 by 720 or 1920 by 1080p. On the plus side though, character dialogue is still legible as it's kept centered, so no problems there. This isn't anything unique to this game or even this engine. Other engines and programs can struggle with less than standard resolutions, but it's still annoying nevertheless. Anyone who's used RPG Maker before can attest to Windows scaling problems. Now, the gameplay is, well, bog standard. It's the purest and most fundamental display of what you'd think of if someone said fantasy RPG. You've got all your guys on the right hand side of the screen facing all the baddies on the left. You have standard attacks coupled with special skills for all your party members, along with purchasable equipment, ins, and other staples of the genre. Though in spite of it just being Final Fantasy, it's very difficult. The game is balanced towards less fluffed encounters and more serious fights. Even the weaklings in the tutorial can pummel you if you're not paying attention. I got my tail handed to me quite a bit, though it never felt overly frustrating. Every lost fight felt like it was something that I did wrong and that I needed to reassess my strategy. The key to clinching victory lies within utilizing your party's skills. Now, it's not so much that regular attack does less damage and a skill does more. No, it's more like regular attack does middling damage and a skill adds various different effects. Some skills do pitiful damage like Glorious Spin Move, but it's a great attack for slowing down enemies that are killing you with their quick turn times. And everyone's skills are pretty varied. You have some that do weak multi-damage, others with strong single foe debuffs, and some that raise your TP for that turn. Oh, and word of advice? You need items. They're not just helpful consumables, but actually necessary for victory. Your equipment can really be make or break for fights. You guys may be the heroes of the story, but you aren't gods. Your party does not start out being able to dish out much punishment, so be sure to augment yourself. The game is still firmly in the demo phase, and there's times when the cracks start showing. You'll have the console editor randomly pop up to remind you that, yes, this is a video game, but thankfully it never seems to affect gameplay, so it's not that big of a deal. Overall, Final Fantasy Legends III is an excellent primer and showcase of the engine. It's very good. Though, this game puts me in a weird spot to review because it's pretty much Final Fantasy Legends III, but the star of the show is the underlying tech propping it up. If you're not a fan of classic Final Fantasy, then you're probably not going to gel with this one. So, I'd recommend checking it out more as a flagship showpiece. You want to see a great demo of what Papermaker is capable of? Well, here it is. The cutscenes, the combat, and overall flow is very well done. Everything is handled in a way where it doesn't feel like the limiting factor is the engine. A very difficult mold to break out of, but Kevin of 9 did a great job with this one. But let's move on to something a little more original. Up next on our Nickel tour is Floatsome. It's an action RPG where you find yourself washed up ashore on an uncharted island. You're an amnesiac, recalling nothing aside from your name. You'll take to the island, scavenging, fighting, and doing your best to survive. Survival. Survival action RPGs can be fun, but this is a genre that I usually don't care for. Stuff like Ark, Rust, Valheim. It's a style of grind and eventual monotony that doesn't appeal to me in the traditional way a turn-based or standard action RPG might. Though there have been two notable exceptions, Minecraft and recently Palworld. But Floatsome. Of course, it's nothing like those popular examples. The survival aspects are very light, so to say. You're not braving the elements or roughing it against nature and foe, more so as much as you're keeping your HP up and casually jaunting through the scenery. When you think of survival, typically your first thought goes to some struggle, right? Well, here that's not the case. Now, if I make it geopolitical real quick, an immediate analogy would be like this. Darfur is as to Rust as America is as to Floatsome. In America, most people aren't worried about survival on the macro scale. Well, okay, I mean, sure, some people are, but survival in the US is quite different from survival in Darfur. It's the same in the game. You never feel threatened or even tense. It's like you're being mildly inconvenienced at summer camp. Now, I don't want to sound so down on the experience. Summer camp can be loads of fun, but it's a far cry from a true survival experience. To boil it down, the game is a simple screen-to-screen scavenger hunt. Your objective is always to find enough materials to craft a raft to the next island. While pretty feature complete, this is more of a proof of concept for a larger game. The team was just laying down the framework for later. They even state as much on their itch page, where this is listed as a Game Jam project. Now, I can't 100% confirm it, but I'm pretty sure Floatsome is or was a project used to get Kevin's feet wet with RPG Papermaker. There's a noticeable DNA between this and FF3 Remake. The way events go from stilted, simple stop-and-go things to more cutscene-like in FF3. Also, how the UI and UX are completely overhauled and custom in Final Fantasy III. Game Gen notwithstanding, there's a clear progression between the two. It's like he got more comfortable with the engine, and it definitely shows. These are both very neat projects, and I enjoyed what was showcased here. I'll be waiting for Legends 3 to release in a more complete state before going back to dive into that one, but in the wise words of a Republic Senator,
we will watch your career with great interest.
Ahoy Ma-Tea is what I like to describe as a cozy, ethical, capitalist simulator. You play as a recently graduated culinary student as you're thrusted into the big scary world of adulthood. There's all the staples here: soul-crushing debt, trying to stay above water financially, and managing whatever meager relationships you may have at that point. But in spite of all that, the atmosphere is quite quaint and comfortable. If any of you guys have ever been to a harbor or port town, then you know exactly the vibe I'm getting at. Once again, the mechanical aspect of the experience is simple. Your moment-to-moment gameplay is you buying the supplies you need, selling them for a small profit, and making the needed repairs on your ship. It's a juggling act to make sure you're taking care of all the responsibilities and on track to pay down your debt. You need to make weekly installments of 100 coins to Miss Shark, or you'll find yourself sleeping with the fishes. In this current form, it's simple, but still engaging. There's not loads of strategy, but you still have to pay attention to your purchasing. In the game's current form, you can only sell beverages, so on my playthrough, I sort of soft-locked myself into a failure route. I wasted money on salad stuffs, and I never fully recouped those costs, a most regrettable outcome. I'd show you what happens when Miss Shark comes to collect, but unfortunately, I had a plethora of technical issues. This is a game I really wanted to like. It has a lot going for it, a great premise, distinctive style, and some very swanky tunes. Though what holds this one back is of course those bugs. Now let me preface this by saying that I expect jank and bugs when working with game jam projects. I didn't go into this episode expecting fully polished releases, though in spite of that, I have my limits as well. Mechanically, this is a game that doesn't want you to play it. How so? Well, lots of smaller bugs which add up to larger issues. Like to start with, menu navigation. So these will be a little difficult to capture on camera, but on some menus, you actually can't move up, only down. It's not a consistent thing either. The menus inside your tea house work fine with up and down, but not some of the merchant shops. Also, you have an odd glitch where sometimes on a merchant window, you can't alter tabs to the right or left. That's a bug that I've had in my game before, so I gotta come from slack. But then come the more egregious offenses. So when you start a new game, the walking controls are actually mixed up. This is a game where you use WASD to move, by the way. I didn't quite catch the original mappings, but it was something to the effect of D being right, Q to the left, R was up, and S wasn't doing anything at all. I thought my keyboard was broken. It was driving me up the wall. Now, thankfully, this game has key rebinds, so in the grand scheme of things, this isn't a big deal. Though, you do know what is a bigger deal? Hitting triggers. And, oh boy. So, this one made the playthrough a bit of a slog. Talking to NPCs, reading your ledger, or really doing anything that involves standing somewhere and pressing enter is abysmal. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's hit or miss most of the time, and more often than not, you're going to miss the trigger and have to fiddle with getting back into position to initiate the action. It's a pain when talking to merchants, but you really feel it when having to work a shift. You take an order, prepare it, then need to fight with the game to get out of the room. I kept count of how many runs I could leave successfully, and it only worked about 20% of the time. Every 2 out of 10 tries. Yikes. Would hate to have to escape the ship during an emergency situation. But I powered through these as well. Yes, it was annoying, but it didn't completely stop me. No, that comes later. The next set of bugs that almost stonewalled me was more ones of the exploration variety. Apparently, transition triggers can infinitely loop their dialogue messages. I tried to explore the other parts of the world, but every time I triggered a screen transition, the overlapping text would not leave. I close it out, take a step, and it would trigger over and over again. This happened consistently and every single time. It stops once you're able to get to another acceptable level, but it's still extremely aggravating. Though, not as aggravating as the final bug, the straw that broke the fox's back. This corner. Oh my. This infernal corner caused the game to soft lock twice, and I didn't have saves at the time. Now I can hear someone getting on me for not saving and triggering the same bug twice, but it really wasn't my fault. The first time I triggered it, I had just started the game and was trying to investigate the Kraken. I immediately quit and tried to trigger the bug again, and for some reason, nothing happened and it was all fine. Cool. Second time it happens was after I had been on hiatus for a while. I come back, refresh my save, play the game again, and by this point I have completely forgotten about the bug. I accidentally walk over to the corner, and what do you know? I trigger it again. Though, to be fair to the game, this corner bug looks like an engine issue. I ran into the same problem in Floatsome. Seems collision detection wigs out if the character intersects with 2 overlapping points. An interesting foible with these larger, more complex environments, and the game also crashed as well. So it looked like here was as good a place as any to wrap things up. Now, don't get me wrong, the game is not bad, just needs some tightening up under the hood. In fact, I think with a proper tune-up, this game could be a flagship title for the engine. And I know a lot of this section sounded like I was just going in because of petty reasons, but issues are issues, no matter how small. Small ones especially are dangerous because they pile up over time. This final game is special. That's not an exaggeration, hyperbole, or a fluff statement. Amongst the select few paper maker games out right now, this stands alone as one that is remarkable. And funny thing is that when analyzed under a microscope, this game doesn't do anything much better than its peers. The moment-to-moment gameplay is still relatively simple, there's no combat, and the game isn't mechanically bulletproof either. No, what this game does so well is to immerse you in its world and really invoke whatever feeling the team wanted you to feel at the time. Feelings of melancholy, belonging, yearning, inadequacy, and hope. And all of these experienced through the monochromatic eyes of our protagonist, Apple. She's a bit of a shy recluse, with a case of seasonal depression. Your goal is to get acquainted in Rivertown, make friends, help out, the whole 9 yards. And the more you interact with others, the more you start to break out of your shell. This is accented by one of the game's primary mechanics, color. Every major action in service to others brightens up the world little by little. The changes become more and more pronounced until the world is absolutely brimming with color. This mostly serves a thematic purpose rather than being mechanical, but it's one of the best bits about the game. You see, a lot of the moment-to-moment gameplay could be described as performing menial tasks. Well, it's an RPG, what else is new? But they don't feel menial here. Part of the reason for that is how intimate the setting is. It's very reminiscent of how other farming and town sims do things. Stick the player in a remote location and have them cooperate with the locals to make it. You're rewarded for those efforts with items necessary for your overall progression. Here in Pigmented Bonds, it's similar to that, except your reward for doing that menial task is usually that neighbor's love and appreciation. I mean, don't misunderstand me, you get proper thanks with key items too, but your inventory will be extremely light during your playthrough. None of those worldly possessions to get in the way of true friendship. In all seriousness though, the team worked very hard to frame every interaction as just that, an interaction and not a transaction. Apple is not helping her neighbors because in turn they'll help her. Her personal motivations are to get better and not feel so useless. There's an earnest desire from the character that bleeds into every interaction with an NPC. It's adorable, and you feel like they're trying their best, which by extension makes you want to try your best. I like that. We as players know we're doing X tasks for Y reward, but sometimes in RPGs there's a disconnect between our actions in game and the characters. You don't feel in sync with the character, and that is always immersion breaking. Oh wait, speaking of break, now is a good enough time as any to break for spoilers. I'm going to start talking story specifics, so if you don't want to get spoiled, then skip to this timestamp down here. Okay, so the story follows Apple as she's settling into Rivertown. By the game's start, she's been there a week and yet has barely made introductions with the other neighbors there. There's no concrete reason given for why she moved besides adulting is hard, but the game does give some loose hints that I'll talk about later. Her first contact is the mayor, whose name I thought was Mr. Bear, but no, it's actually Gerald. Not sure how I missed that. Anyways, so Gerald tells Apple about the upcoming celebration, a festival to celebrate Rivertown's 10th year anniversary as a little community. It's going to be a big job and such, it'll be all hands on deck. You sort of reluctantly agree, and the mayor has you start by heading to the festival coordinator's house, a zany scientist named Dr. Snizzles. He mistakes you as a messenger from the future, and you can totally play it straight, which I do like. If you do, he'll refer to you as future child for like 5 in-game days. It's kind of funny. So, you run an errand for him, you go and give this cat its birthday present, and from there, you and the doctor talk about the festival. He will set into motion one of the main quests of the game, if you will. Bring a colorful outfit to the festival. You don't have one, so your first stop tomorrow is to rectify that. You then head on to bed, and you end up dreaming about the day. These start out sort of nonsensical, but pretty soon you begin to follow a B-plot along with them. The next day sees you heading over to Lady Henrietta's house. She's the town's fashionista, and she can turn you from drab into fab. But it's going to take materials. You'll need to provide her with red, yellow, orange, and green fabrics, all of which can be purchased or traded from Elliot, her neighbor. And I do like your first interaction with him. It's pretty awkward since Apple is sort of expecting to get some fabrics for free, but my man is like, nah, I've got a business to run. Even though Apple says okay, that social faux pas is just... So you leave embarrassed and broke, heading back down towards the square where you run into Dr. Snizzles. He thanks you again for helping out yesterday and gives you 100 coins. Now, this part felt a little bit self-serving, but I can forgive it. So, with your coins in tow, you head back to Elliot and receive the red fabric. Update Henrietta, who then lets you know about when the festival takes place, 9 days and counting. So once again, with the day's task complete, Apple heads to bed. The dream starts off the same as yesterday's, with you talking to a character you interacted with prior. But tonight, things change. You find yourself somewhere new, a field of sorts, surrounded by flowers all around. And as you move closer to the end, you come across yourself, sporting a new red hoodie from Henrietta. And we waste no time pressing our own self on whether we were ready to leave home and start anew. And whether you answer yes or no, you're not sure at this time. And this indecision is one of those personal stumbling blocks Apple will be working towards eradicating. For now, we awake and tackle the next day. The next day sees you helping the good doctor with some more busy work. He needs you to run 100 flyers to the mayor's house for the festival, and you can only carry 20 at a time, so prepare for 5 trips. Now, this is a part that I can see a lot of people deciding not to power through, but just stick with it. Apple moves really quickly, and the mayor's house isn't very far. Life can't all be high-octane activities. 5 trips later, and you'll be back in the square during the evening. Apple is about to head off to bed, but not before being stopped by Gerald. He hands you a manga book as a sort of thanks and a nudge for participating in the community. From there, Apple asks about the town, and Gerald divulges how Rivertown came to be. He was once a merchant in a faraway kingdom until the king summoned him. The dog monarch charged him with going out and establishing his own town. This little interaction is neat, but to me, it doesn't hold the weight the developer was probably intending it to. Because of this game's smaller scale, it's hard to connect and get a sense of scale for the larger world. When I spend all my time in an insular neighborhood, what care do I have for an unseen land far away? You also don't hear too much more about the kingdom, which is a small narrative symptom that crops up a little bit further in the game. But for now, let's head to bed and continue on with the next days. From here, the story takes an even pace. You do a major helpful action for someone or the community, then head to bed for a dream. Your dreams continue to be about your neighbors as the festival date fast approaches. With 7 days left is where the story takes an interesting turn. So far in all your dreams, you've dreamt of your neighbors and your actions from the day prior. But during your 7th day nap, you meet somebody new. They immediately recognize you and call out for you to join them. The screen fades and they remind you of your birthday. Apple just abruptly wakes up and makes no reaction to this. So you're left to speculate. Is this a dream? A flashback? Premonition? The jury's still out, but there's no time to ponder that. 6 days left. From here, the world's color has nearly returned and things are looking up. Literally. You spend the day helping get Lady Henrietta's cat down from a large tree, and it's also the first day that you get to explore past the Northeast Bridge, which immediately becomes relevant as you make your way back towards the town center. Dr. Snizzles is feeling sick, so he opens up the co-coordinator position for the festival. Everyone's schedules are pretty tight, so Apple internally wars with herself if this is something that she can handle. But of course it is, so she volunteers. Later that night, you're back in bed and dreaming of the mysterious friend again. And I want to make a very clear point, that this game's art direction gets absolutely gorgeous from here. I played this game on an OLED panel, and it was a visual treat for the eyes. The color choices, the scene composition, and framing make them works of art. The designers are really trying to invoke a strong emotional response, and they're getting the most mileage out of those assets to do it. I have such strong respect for that. Nothing on this screen is something we haven't seen before. The ground, the sky, flowers, etc. But the way they're carefully placed attests to the developer's keen eye and understanding of what makes a scene emotional, and the still artwork? Just magnifique. But alas, you wake up, and this time in tears. There's again no dialogue reaction, but the crying is enough to accent how Apple feels. With 5 days left, you begin making preparations for the festival, heading to the grounds to get an initial idea of how to utilize the space. To brainstorm further, you need to talk to everyone in town to get their opinion of what they'd like to see at the festival. It's more busy work, but very appropriate for event planning. You ever try to do something like that? Stuff's not easy. I have trouble getting my coworkers on board with what to order for lunch. No, Pam, you can't order a la carte on a corporate lunch expense. You gotta eat the same cold cuts as the rest of us. Thankfully, Rivertown residents are a lot more cooperative. Everyone adds their own input for food, games, to decorations. So with all their opinions, you head back to the doctor to get cracking. He spends a day working on blueprints for what needs to be done and tells you he'll be out sick the next day, so you gotta do the legwork.
I'm doing all the legwork.
What? Legwork?
Oh, there's legwork.
Back in your dream, you see a sneak peek of the festival stalls and all your neighbors hanging around. But you're not interested in that. Up ahead, your mysterious friend is waiting for you and drops the bombshell that she's leaving for the moon. It sounds outlandish, but you gotta recall that most of the people you talk to in dreams spout nonsense and gibberish. And with that interaction done, dream finishes and you wake up for day 4, a personal favorite of mine. It's a rainy day that sees you heading to every neighbor to let them know that you'll be hosting a pre-festival meeting at your place. And since you don't have an umbrella, everyone you talk to will just give you a different piece of clothing to stave off the rain and cold. It's a nice touch, and Apple just looks so cozy in that getup. She eventually summons everyone, and after a quick cleanup of the place, they all arrive. So, they start going over their duties for the festival, but with the storm picking up, they all decide to crash at Apple's place till it dies down. Now originally, I was thinking to myself, oh man, this is going to be one of those pace killer sections in RPGs. You know, where the momentum of the game has the brakes put on it. But this day was the total opposite. It starts with you just talking to everyone in the living room. You know, icebreaker type stuff. But eventually, Gerald mentions how the previous owner had a secret room. So with a thorough search through the bookshelf, the way to the room is opened. Immediately, the space is recognized by Elliot as belonging to a Bellatrix, an old neighbor that left 5 years ago, and one that no one's had contact with since. A bit of foreshadowing, perhaps? At any rate, you need to kill time waiting for the storm to pass, so you go around getting the neighbors to sign a get well soon card for Dr. Snizzles. Very cute slice of life stuff. With the card signed, the storm soon passes, and all your neighbors decide to call it a day. With everyone gone, you head to bed. You soon meet up with your dreamy friend, and she very quickly gets down to tax brass. She's leaving soon, and her not-so-subtle hints let you know that your days of hanging out are numbered. Turns out, her ramblings from the other night were real, she's really from the moon, and her return is imminent. Now, up to this point, the conversation has been very grounded and emotional. The scene is accenting all the right points. So, imagine my surprise when Apple says this next. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this part took me out. And don't misunderstand me, I know what they meant and are trying to say. It's just the choice of words here make it seem like some sort of avant-garde joke. It's just really funny to me. Just two friends here discussing the philosophical meaning behind cringe. It's so out of left field. Just like another part of the story, but we'll get to that soon enough. You're now 3 days out from the festival, and things are starting to pick up. You're sent on another delivery errand by the doctor, and you need to get approval from everyone about their blueprints. Once that's done, Dr. Snizzles calls a meeting for later in the day, and you can see everyone's progress on their bits of work. It's all very lovely in this wash of evening light. Head to bed, and no friend for you tonight. It's just you and your thoughts. #mood for all my Twitter expats. It's a good scene though. Apple's finally climbing over that metaphorical mountain, finally addressing her low self-esteem. It's nothing overtly profound, but I do like this scene. Sometimes we actually are our own best motivator. This scene has some decent momentum behind it, and I was totally ready for day 2 to start off with an invigorated Apple. But no! We get whiplash instead, and admittedly, my least favorite narrative beat. You recall me mentioning the out of left field part earlier? Well, here it is. On day 2, out of nowhere, Elliot meets you in the town square and drops the bombshell that he's moving out immediately. And apparently, everyone in the town has known since last week. He apologizes for forgetting to tell you, and while Apple's okay with it, I'm not. This part does not have the emotional punch the developer wanted it to. We were just getting to know the neighbors better, and Elliot especially, since his life is mysterious anyways. There was no build up to this, And like, life I suppose is random, but this doesn't feel earned. It feels contrived to me. He says he's going to fight a monster that took his star, which is another narrative fastball from way left. Like, I know there's been tiny hints about star people and life on the moon, but it's really random. If you play this game, you'll see what I'm talking about, because I did go and search, but I couldn't find any hints or concrete clues to this happening. Just a library section with mentions about star people. That's a jump for the player. This part was jarring, and it was hard for me to forgive because Elliot was one of the characters I was hoping to learn more about. But instead, we get the video game equivalent of Poochie going back to his planet.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
And they just never come back or are brought up again. Like Elliot here. Anyways, you still have those mysterious parts from earlier, and they are the parts to Elliot's music box. Borrow Dr. Snitzel's toolbox, take it home, and get cracking. Once it's fixed, you go outside and get tasked with bringing the boyo back to the square. It's all emotional and everyone's sad, but I can't feel the strongest possible connection to this event because the emotional investment feels fake now. We spend all this time helping our neighbors, becoming closer, and then we get gut punched like this. What was missing from this whole sequence was more telegraphing. Now, I'm not saying make the twist obvious, but there should have been more clues as to this was happening. Perhaps every time you visit Elliot, there's more and more moving boxes in his house, or maybe someday you just catch him stargazing outside. Just something, anything to make this work. I want to feel something here, but I can't because the twist has no build-up. It's not even a twist. Like, everything up to this point and beyond it has been pretty solid, narratively speaking. I was just let down a bit. That night, Apple's dreams take her back to that outlook with her dreamside friend. And as she said prior, her time has ran out. And this is why I'm holding the game in this higher regard. This scene here is composed so well. The lighting, the music, the dialogue, everything is firing on all cylinders, and it all comes together for such a heart-rending scene. This is what the Elliot departure should have been. A slow build-up between the characters, and a telegraphed finality to their encounter. I almost want to call it a twist when it really isn't. Dreamy Girl told us she would eventually leave, but all of your interactions are spent pretty much ignoring that fact, because why would you want to dwell on something so sad? So when it finally happens, there's no pomp, no circumstance, she just disappears. You wake up with only one day left to go, so you spend it on the fairgrounds, showing off your brand new colorful outfit. This part felt like a slog because it involves this boring back and forth between the characters. No one's really saying anything important or advancing the plot, just people commenting on the color of your outfit. This is a day that could have been cut and nothing would have been lost. Which brings us to the very last day. The festival is upon us, and the mayor cues up a very special speech. And like most politicians, it's pretty much all fluff. Once done, you can finally run towards the festival grounds, and I do mean run. This is the only part of the game where your movement speed is increased, which is pretty nice but also an interesting choice this late in the game. With the festival underway, you mosey around and talk to everyone. The NPCs here are all varied, and if I'm not mistaken, I think they're all developer Easter eggs. You know, people who helped out, and some inside jokes. My favorite NPC is King Simon, who talks like Gorbachev from the Mario Brothers Super Show.
You are great Americans! America is great country!
You can play 3-card Ma-Tea with Kitty, but other than that, there's not much to do at the festival. So once you're ready to advance things, talk to Lady Thoughts on the stage, and she'll kick off her spectacular performance. Well, I imagine spectacular. The screen just fades to black and everyone says how awesome it was. Would have liked to have seen something, but it's a game jam, so I digress. The mayor gives another heartfelt speech about community and how wonderful the festival was, and once he's done, you head back home for bed. That night, your dream is short but important. Just a personal affirmation that you are indeed ready for whatever challenges may come next. And with that done, you're woken up by Henrietta. She excitedly tells you about a new resident as she drags you along to meet them. And wouldn't you know, it's our old dreamy friend, or should I say Bellatrix. And the game ends here. And while this ending was heavily implied, I actually didn't think we would see Bellatrix again after she left for the moon. The game loves just yanking folks away, so I honestly wasn't even expecting her. I thought maybe Elliot would pop back in for a visit or something, but at any rate, that's the end of the game. And by far the best RPG Papermaker game out. And it's free. The team should feel really proud of themselves because what they shipped was a great experience. I know there are some parts I nitpicked a bit, but this is still an awesome time, and I genuinely recommend playing it for yourself. It only takes about an hour to complete, but it's a masterclass in how to work within the limits of your scope. When I first set out to make this episode, my original expectations were pretty low. Low for the engine, low for the games produced with it, and low for developer adoption. But I'm happy to say that I was wrong on all fronts. Wano has made an excellent piece of software. The community not only has embraced it, but rallied behind it to produce some awesome games and resources to boot. There's tutorials, documentation, plugins, and a lively Discord server where newbies can ask for help. It's all quaint and yet very polished in its own right. Simply put, the engine is ready for prime time. If you're interested in creating RPGs of a similar style, or just doing hobbyist development, then you can't go wrong with RPG Papermaker. It channels the same ease of use that makes the Kadokawa product so compelling. As I said earlier, game development is difficult, sometimes insanely so, but a great community can make all the difference. These guys are very welcoming and will be happy to have you if you're interested in using the engine. As for me, I'm excited to see what the future holds for them, and I'm hoping some of these projects can make it into a future Paperverse Direct. RPG Papermaker community, keep on doing a good job. The more paper game developers, the better. I just can't wait to see this list of games grow. Oh man, this was a long one. I've always enjoyed producing long-form content, but was never assured that this would be something that you guys really cared about. Several of these videos later, and I still feel like I'm just getting my bearings on the production side of things. So if you like this longer style of video, then please kindly do the YouTube things. It's really the best indicator to YouTube's cold and feeling algorithm that this content is worthwhile. There's definitely more to come, and I think you guys are going to like what I'm cooking up next. But all things in due time. So, until we meet again, ciao.